Welcome to the Covert Narcissism Podcast. I'm your host, Renee Swanson.
I'm Ross Rosenberg, the author of The Human Magnet Syndrome and the creator of the Codependency Cure and the Healing the Inner Trauma Child Trauma Resolution Method. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm excited because Renee Swanson and I are doing our second collaboration or discussion, and she gracefully and generously agreed to be a guest on my podcast or YouTube channel. And she's going to talk about covert narcissism and how her own story molded her, informed her, led her into better understanding a problem that so few people truly have a mastery over and be able to help others because of that. But what I like to do, if that's okay with you, Renee, can you let our listeners and viewers know a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. Ross, thank you. And it is a pleasure to be here. I am Renee Swanson. I offer life coaching. I'm a coach that specializes now with victims of covert narcissistic abuse. And I've been running a podcast actually for quite some time, the Covert Narcissism Podcast. And I actually started on YouTube, but I decided and found out real quick that wasn't my strength. And when I got into podcasting, that seemed to really connect for me. And so podcasting is kind of where I landed in that.
Tell me a little bit more about what you do as a coach. And we were talking right before I hit the record button about you have a practice or a group you started. What is
I do.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure, I do. It started actually as a Facebook group, and it was just a Facebook group so that I could find out, I knew I couldn't be alone out there in this world. Mm-hmm. And so I started a Facebook group with a friend of mine who she didn't have anything to do with covert narcissism, but you got to have a person to start a group with. So I started it with her. And it just exploded on me, with people telling their stories and reaching in and all of that. And over time, that group's called Covert Narcissism Group. And over time, it actually just kind of shortcut to CNG. And so I actually now run CNG life coaching. And that group is, 58,000 people. But in my practice now.
Wait. I think your practice. What? You have 58,000 people working with you. No, there's no way. Otherwise,
this is the Facebook group. Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. You're 50. Okay.
Yes, this is the Facebook group. It's reached the level of 58,000 people. So I have a team of moderators that help me to moderate that. Originally, I was doing all of it, and it just became overwhelming, really fast, and right. too much time to try to monitor all of that. But the then where that led to was for me to get the training that I needed as a life coach and to start setting up individual coaching sessions and group coaching sessions. And so the services that I offer, that are paid services as opposed to the Facebook group, there's no charge to be in there. The podcast, all of that is just what I offer to this world. But the individual sessions and the coaching sessions, the individual and group coaching sessions is where we really get into the nitty gritty of that healing journey.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And people, we're going to list her contact information, links in the details sections of the video or the podcast. I came up with this idea that I wanted to hear your story. But before I say why I thought about that, I wanted to tell you a story. When I first wrote the book, The Human Magnet Syndrome, I wrote a biographical piece. And is with the publisher who did not want me to put it in the book. And because I was a new author and I had little say with what I had to do, they pretty much strongly pushed me into putting it in the epilogue. And I don't know about you, but a lot of people don't read epilogues. And
I actually do. I'm one of those weird people that do. So.
Well, I do too. Maybe more people read it than not. And when it came to writing the second edition, I expanded my biographical piece, and I think I called it "Stop Passing the Baton" and used the analogy of a track team where each each participant passes the baton off, and of course, you try to win the race. And it became this really complicated chapter about 4 generations of my family. And I had this idea that I wanted to entice the reader to read further by having them understand that this is a problem that not only affects us, and for me, it was codependency, but impacts all the generations to come, and is reflective of all the generations behind us. And that this was not just a personal problem, but a problem that impacts the world, especially a person's world. And I kind of had the idea that the publisher had put in my head that no one wants to hear that, but I didn't listen to that. And it ended up being a resounding success because everyone who read the book told me how important the first chapter was. So I tell you that story because I think people really value the story behind the person. What happened to them that molded them, that created their desire, their ambition, their focus on becoming the healer, the coach, the psychotherapist. And I would love for you to share your story with the listeners or the viewers about your own experience in surviving covert narcissism and how that shaped you to become the magnificent, wonderfully qualified and talented woman that you are.
Well, Ross, thank you for saying that, and thank you for sharing that story, because I think it is crucial to realize, what brings us to who we are today, and how then, even especially then in raising our own kids, how that filters into their life and their kids and their kids, because this is a generational, I've called it a generational curse. Of just a repeated pattern. It's a repeated pattern throughout so many families.
Yeah,
And so I'm happy to share my story.
So when did it all start for you?
Oh, it started for me back at birth. There is no doubt about that at all. I was raised in the church, in a Southern church. My dad actually is a preacher, and very much so was raised in the church environment. And I was absolutely taught that it was my job to help everyone around me, to keep people happy, to be the peacemaker, to put my needs aside, to care for them, to put my feelings aside, to care for them. And I took it to heart. I grew up in essence, a missionary. Like, it was my mission to help other people. And when I look at, my parents' marriage, which, by the way, they just celebrated 60 years, just this last week, and they have a beautiful relationship and a beautiful marriage. But when I look at my childhood in that environment, I never saw them argue. I never saw them disagree. It was a perfect marriage. And I grew up just believing.
How does a perfect marriage create a child who will eventually fall in love with a narcissist? And I say this just to ask you, was there parts of your childhood, because you said you like naturally were this giver, this helper, and from my point of view, and it doesn't have to be yours, is that children learn to be givers and helpers and sacrificers because they feel like that's how they get the most love and attention. Can you trace back your attraction to the covert narcissist to your childhood, or do you think that doesn't really apply in your case?
Oh, it very much so applies. For me, I earned that love. By then, I got the approval of the church. I got the approval of, God's love, what was envisioned to me as God's love. And so I very much so became that people pleaser because that was my role in life, not because, it's natural for me to be compassionate. That is always definitely there. I have my father's compassion, but the role, when people ask me, who was your narcissistic parent? For me, it was the church.
Right.
And the church became, that overseer that was always judging, always superior, always entitled, always demanding my attention and my time. And so that was the tiptoeing I was doing was around the church.
It's interesting. You said, I can't help being a psychotherapist, and it drives my friends crazy. But you said a word. Um, your role was envisioned. You said, "quote This role was envisioned for me." And to me, that's a clue to what you're saying, is that you kind of grew up in an environment where people had an idea of what you're supposed to be, and that could have very well led you in a direction to not have a really clear sense of yourself and your self needs.
It very much so did. I did not have a clear sense of my own needs, because some of the things I was taught was, I'm never allowed to be angry or upset because Christians don't get angry. I'm not allowed to worry or fret because Christians don't worry. That means your faith isn't strong enough. So if I became angry or frustrated over something, the self-judgment was immediate of that must mean that I'm not a strong enough Christian and I have to go make things right with God. And so I wasn't allowed to be angry. I couldn't allow myself to be angry.
Yeah. And so someone distorted the gospel to fit a belief that you should control parts that are very human, to try to push those down or discourage them. And that's really sad that you didn't get a chance to be free in the expression of your life and feelings and reactions to it.
Right. And when I say that, I never saw my parents fight or argue or disagree, that's very true. Okay. And so what it did for me, while that can be good and that can be seen as healthy, what it did for me was it created a belief in me that a husband and wife never fight. They never argue. They never disagree. Okay. Well, now here comes reality. And I'm in my marriage, and of course we're going to disagree because everybody goes through this.
Right.
But the first time we disagreed, I was horrified that something was wrong with me, and it was my job to fix this because I thought that meant our marriage was at risk.
Right.
And so I would dive in as fast as I could to fix it, which meant I would just give in. Like, okay, no, you just do it your way. And I would fawn all over him. But it was immediate.
Right.
And I didn't think there was anything wrong with it.
Right.
I thought that was my role.
Actually, it reminds me of an article I read years ago. I don't know if it's true or it was an accurate article, but it said because of the Japanese culture's fastidiousness about washing hands and antiseptics and germs, that they found that the kids were growing up with weakened immune systems because they didn't their body didn't get to face the natural challenges out there. So analogously, if your parents got along and everyone was so happy, you didn't get the natural challenges that children get in order to learn things.
Right.
And
right.
So and I see
even in my friendships, I remember in college. So I'm now around the age of 20. And if I had a friend that I really disagreed with, I remember just being heartbroken that it meant my friendship was over. It was so extreme, such a strong catastrophic thinking of, well, it just means that this friendship's over. I'm going to lose them as a friend. They're never going to stick around. They're never going to care for me. And it didn't prove to be true. But every single time there was a disagreement, that's where my mind and my heart went.
So you had an abandonment response.
Yes.
That if something went wrong, you immediately thought it was your fault and thought if you didn't correct it, you would lose that.
Yes. And then I would cling like crazy to fix it. Then I've got to be the one to fix all it. And so that's fed right into a marriage with a covert narcissist, of course.
And because this is not a therapy session, thankfully to you.
And maybe it should be.
No, but I would suggest, and let's not go in that direction, but I would suggest that that lack of experience, that fear of abandonment, that need to make everything right, represents your childhood, as you pointed out, your experience with the church, and so you're in college, and you're very sensitive, and especially to someone not liking you or abandoning you. And so how did that, if it did that type of pattern lead you into being attracted to what someone would end up being a narcissist or a covert narcissist?
So yes, when when I got out of college, I didn't meet my future husband until I was, I want to say about 24, 25. I'd have to go back and do the math again. But it was definitely after college. I'd been out for a couple of years. And when I first met him, it was an immediate hook. Like, he liked everything I liked. He wanted everything I wanted. He seemed to be just the perfect match for me. And at this point, I was so eager for a relationship. Like, I was just terrified I'm going to live alone forever. I mean, the things you go through in your mid-20s. And I was eager to, I want to raise a family. And so there was some eagerness, that maybe the abandonment issue of, okay, nobody's ever going to love me. Nobody's ever. Right. And so there was a combination of all of that going on. And then here I meet this guy who, again, like, everything I said I liked, he's like, oh wow, I like that too. And it just seemed to be such an immediate hook that then I was doing everything in my effort to keep him. I was doing everything in my effort to please him, I'd always said I would date for at least 2 years before I'd even consider marrying someone. We dated for 4 months.
So
4 months.
Basically, it's the human magnet syndrome. By the way, the human magnet syndrome, in my opinion, governs all relationships, healthy or not. But there was this intuitive feeling of a fit, opposite personalities, and it felt perfect. It delivered you away from insecurity or fear of being alone. It probably delivered him away from it too, and this great attraction. But he's already painting a picture of himself that is not based upon who he really is, but what he believes you want to know in order to get you to fall in love with him.
Right. Yes, very much so. It was, he was finding the things to say that he believed I wanted in a relationship. And I know we all do that to some extent.
Oh yeah, of course.
But, yeah, you want this other person to be happy with you. And so we all give a little bit in that regard, but it was everything to the T and to the extreme.
So
I was a classical musician, and all of a sudden, that's all I've ever listened to. And that's all. Well, none of that proved to be true.
Oh, so we all put on our best face when we meet someone. And, one of my jokes is, it might take 6 months to a year before we forget to put the toilet seat down or pick up our underwear or put our underwear down on the ground. But everyone normally puts their best face forward, and that's normal. But
Sure.
It sounded like he was making things up to get you to trust him that essentially were lies.
Right. And it's one thing where, if you say to somebody, hey, I'm a classical musician and I'm studying classical music, and the other person says, hey, I've always kind of wanted to learn more about that. That's great. Can you teach? That's different than, oh, that's what I've listened to all my life. And that's different.
So, yeah. So he's setting you up like the con man, the salesman. Narcissists, as I pointed out, have some sociopathic qualities. Some are more sociopathic than others, but so he is making himself look like the perfect one. So you tell more.
So, and so what happens is when we're in these, and for me, I know I didn't ever actually see him for who he really was. All I'm seeing is actually who I want to see. And who I wanted to see was this perfect match, this soulmate, or this, my wonderful husband. And that's what I saw. And so then things happen, like he might be sharp-tongued with somebody else. Like, I would see that he'd get sharp-tongued when we were with some friends or when we were, out in public. And I remember thinking, well, but he's not that way with me.
Right.
And so it was easy to kind of, somehow that makes it okay.
Right.
I don't, and that should never be okay. Okay. But I somehow allowed that to be okay because I found myself thinking, well, at least he's not like that with me.
Right.
If you were thinking, hey, at least they aren't like that with me, it's just a matter of time.
Right. So, yeah. And So he is calculating how much he needs to be with you in order to keep you connected and hooked. And because he really is a narcissist, there's the parts of him, his mask falls off with other people. And
Yes.
you're feeling secure because you think, well, it's for them, not me. And you're being very hopeful. So what happened next? I mean, what was the next phase of that relationship?
So we got married. We were madly in love. We were the perfect couple. Everybody looked at us like we were just such a great fit for each other. And I want to tell you, the honeymoon phase actually lasted a really long time. Now, it was because I could never let an argument happen. Like I was do what?
No, how long did it last?
I'm gonna say that honeymoon phase, if you want to call it a honeymoon phase, it's also rose-colored glasses phase, lasted probably a good 6 or 7 years. And I made it my goal to always keep him happy. And so if there was ever a disagreement or an argument, I mean, instant. I was jumping in to fix that and take care of it and cover everything up. We had kids a couple of years into the marriage. We had kids. So I just got very occupied being a mom, being a wife. And everybody looked at us like they thought we were great together.
So for 6 or 7 years, he was able to keep his mask on because, for whatever reason, you were exactly what he needed. Pathological narcissists, whether the coverts, which are more secretive and systematically manipulative, but on the QT, you were not a problem. You did everything for him. You enjoyed, you loved, you appreciated your role. And so I think of a narcissist thinking, why should anything be bad? She gives me everything and makes me happy.
Right.
When did things shift?
Well, it shifted gradually. I definitely will say that, until a couple of very significant milestones happened.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember looking back, in my head, I was making what I call my never again list. I'll never say it that way again. I'll never do that again. I'll never talk about this again. That's my never again list. And it goes on forever. Like, I didn't realize how long my list was getting. Topics weren't safe to talk about. Opinions definitely were not safe to be voiced. And every time that I would try, and I would get met back with so much resistance or harshness, it just instantly went on my never again list, and it just kept growing. So that went on for years.
It really wasn't, because of your perspective of growing up, it really wasn't a honeymoon per se. But consciously it probably was, because if you did something upset him, you made quick adjustments, and there was no stress or there was no conflict. But but if someone's looking from the outside, there's problems happening right away, but you're absorbing them and not letting them feel consciously obvious. So it sounded like there was a lot of problems right away, but you were just so amenable to change and willing to accommodate him. And that must have taken a lot out of you over time.
It very much so did. I mean, I became a contortionist. Okay, I'll turn this way, I'll turn that way. It's like the amoeba that just kind of gravitates and moves around. You talk about that dance, and you want to turn this way, we turn this way. You want to move that way, we move this way. I became really, really good at it.
And you said tired too.
Exhausted.
What was the impact of that, of being this contortionist?
So the impact was a couple of things that really started to take place. One is isolation from my friends, because for starters, I didn't have time. I didn't have time to go have friendships because I was so busy keeping him at peace. Another big reason was because it wasn't worth the price I paid at home. If I went and did things with friends, I got met with judgment and jealousy and just that silent treatment, cold shoulder, circular conversations, all the things. And so it wasn't worth it to me. So I actually sacrificed a lot of my own friendships, a lot of my own, relationships with girlfriends that were an active part of my life. Another effect that it had was I wasn't able to be the mom that I wanted to be, and I knew I could be, because I was constantly consumed by my concerns over his reactions, his words, how would he react if I do this, if I do that? And so I was modifying my role with my kids to accommodate him. And it was not healthy.
I have a question. Have you ever thought about that he knew what he was doing, that he knew he was doing something overtly or covertly to make you know what was wrong that could potentially upset him and change before he got upset? Because you're talking about you did anything to make him happy, but I'm wondering if there was something in the background, gaslighting, brainwashing, that he was giving you hints on what not to do that would make him unhappy.
So the $1 million question is he aware of it or not? And a lot of people ask me that is, do they know what they're doing or do they not? And I will say that, all this time that I was in that marriage with him and going through all of this, do I really truly think that he was trying to hurt us? I really don't. I don't think that, I don't think he's an evil, malicious person. I honestly think that he was a lot completely not aware of what he was doing. I think it was his own survival tactics from his childhood that were being triggered that caused him to interact with us in the way he was.
Right.
But when I would have discussions with him about the anger that he was portraying to all of us, he had no clue that anger is what had come out and anger is what had been shown. And so in that regard, do I think that things were happening that were subconscious for him? Yes, 100%. Do I think there were things that he was doing that was communicating to me there was going to be a problem before the problem ever came? 100%. So I'm not sure how much of it he was aware of.
So I'm going to challenge you. So he was different with other people than you. So he was difficult, not sensitive, not empathetic. I'm generalizing, so if I'm wrong, let me know.
Yeah.
But with you, if someone is different with one group of people and not another, then they're making adjustments and they're conscious of it. If I'm on a job interview or on a first date, I'm going to be much different than if I'm talking to my brother who just naturally annoys me. And so my suggestion, and of course, we don't need to figure this out, but my suggestion is that he was malicious because he made decisions of who he did what to based upon what you said. And he needed you to not think he was malicious to keep it escalating to a point. So was there ever a clue that maybe he knew what he was doing and he had an idea of why it benefited him, or you think he was pretty much
I think there's a weird combination there. I do think because he would treat us differently when other people were around,
right,
than when other people were not around.
So he knew what he was doing.
He knew what he was doing. Yes, he knew what he was doing.
But he needed you to know he was oblivious and didn't know what was going on, so he can play the victim. Now, by the way, if I say something that doesn't feel right, just say, nah, wrong.
So no, it's the problem is it's such a weird combination.
Right.
I think his desire to be a good person was very genuine. I think he desired to be a good husband and be a good person.
He desired to be a good person according to what he needed.
Right. I don't think he can make that connection as to what that really means.
Right. So he had a narcissistic desire to look like a good person. He just had no ability to understand that included taking care of other people.
Right.
Which is
right. And
he's a narcissist, and we know that. So
right. Yeah. Right. And so that's where I think the conflict lies, where it's, he knew, because he would behave in a certain way when other people were around, he knew, what it really should look like in a home, what there should be, interactions that are healthy and positive and good. But behind closed doors, he definitely was not capable of maintaining that.
Yeah. Again, you're painting a picture of his sociopathic traits. He knew what was right. In order to survive, you have to create an outside image, in order to survive in society. But when you're home, the covert narcissist lets the mask down, and they are themselves.
Right. When other people were in the home, it was like we were back in that dating time when he was fulfilling that perfect role.
So it was part of the con game, and so please continue.
So the years just went by, and I made so many excuses for him of, well, he's just having a bad day, or he's just not feeling well, or he's stressed at work. Like, I became the expert at excuses. Okay. Right. And I was making these excuses to our own kids and saying, daddy's just having a bad day today, or he's not feeling good, whatever. And our kids were hurting, they definitely were hurting. And
they're the next generation. They're being, just like you were, just like I was. We don't know that, but they're being hurt because they're a part of something that doesn't make sense.
Right. Well, yes, the cognitive dissonance that's there is massive, because, and even in myself, when I hear myself say, well, I don't think he ever meant to actually hurt us. And yet all of this is going on. So, I mean, it's still, there's that trying to make sense out of this is like trying to catch a ghost. It'll make sense 1 minute, and then it just completely disappears in front of you. And that's what my kids were experiencing.
Let me paraphrase it. Trying to make sense of it is like catching a ghost, and he made sure he was a ghost, because if he is an apparition and not easy to identify, then he gets to survive. So he probably was very conscious of making sure that you couldn't see it, because that made him last longer in the relationship.
Yeah. Well, he got really good at, when the anger came out, the anger instantly fed into his victim role. Okay.
Do you think he did that on purpose, or was it reactive?
I think it was reactive. I think a large chunk of it was, I think the anger was reactive. Now, the victim role, that one, I think there's definitely a little bit more purpose there.
So
but the anger was a reactive.
So there would be a narcissistic injury, and then he would calculate, like covert narcissists and sociopaths do, what do I need to do in order to get what I want, which is get someone to stop doing something they don't like, or to do something they want. And that must have really had to take a toll on you.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I physically, it was taking a massive toll. My body was one giant wad of muscles. Okay. Everything tense, everything tight, headaches constantly. I was dropping weight, very unhealthy. And still trying to juggle all of this. It was like I was trying to swim the Atlantic holding 2 kids up, because they're both drowning in this as well. And I'm trying to make sense out of it. Right. And so as this went forward, I never actually considered, because of all the excuses and all sweeping everything under the rug, I never truly considered that he actually was a mean person.
Right.
And that just never crossed my mind. He can't be. It wasn't even that, okay, is he? Maybe he is. It was never even a consideration.
You have been listening to the Covert Narcissism Podcast with your host, Renee Swanson. Be sure to check out our website at www.covertnarcissism.com. There you will find many resources just for you to help you on this journey. You can also reach out to me by email at Renee, RENEE, at cnglifecoaching.com. Those letters are CNG, as in Covert Narcissism Group. I do look forward to hearing from you. I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing.